everybody. Welcome to another episode of Punching Up with Sean Conroy. I am Sean Conroy. I am, as always, punching up. Punching up, of course, as a variety of meetings. We're talking about it in terms of scripts and comedy and making things better, making everything better. So I had an experience this week, which is a very common experience in the creative process of writing television scripts, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. And I will first tell everybody what happened. I have a script that I have been working on for a while. It is a pilot script of a very fun, weird, funny animated show, which is the type of stuff I've been working on for over a decade at this point. I really like this show. I hope it goes somewhere. I am working on it with a production house in Ireland and a production company here in Los Angeles. And I'm working on it with a co-creator who is from Ireland. And, he and I have been putting this whole thing together. And we have been supported most recently by a fund in Ireland, an arts fund, which they have in Europe. They believe in supporting the arts. I mean, in the US, let's get rid of it because it ain't gonna make anybody any money, peak capitalism. But in Europe, they still think art is important. And so they have supported us recently, and we're submitting this script for the next round of possible support. And of course, by support, I mean financial support, not just moral support, which is always nice, but doesn't feed your children. I don't have children, but they would be hungry if I did. But we're submitting it for this next round of possible funding, which would mean actually producing a pilot, which would mean a lot more money than we've already got because pilots are expensive, animation is expensive. And all of this is by way of saying we submitted the most recent version of the pilot script to all the producers. And we had a conference call this week. And first of all, let me, as a side note, say these producers are great. I really have enjoyed working with them. They've been incredibly supportive. You never know who your producers are going to be or what they're going to be like. Sometimes producers are people who, you know, I won't say failed as writers, but, really feel like they should be writers and should have an equal influence on the project. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're very talented, and sometimes they are not right and they are not talented, and that's why they are producers. And in this case, these people are great. They know what they're good at. They do the things they're good at. And I guess I'll tell you what the note was, and then I'll go through all the things I feel about taking notes, and then I'll tell you what the result of our conversation was. So the pilot is fairly complicated. There's lots of characters. It's a 15-minute pilot, which means getting through an entire story as quickly as possible in a very small amount of real estate. And we successfully did that with a number of stories, a wide variety of characters. The fun with animation is you get to introduce lots of characters early on because every character is so distinct in terms of voice and appearance and clothing. So we introduce a bunch of characters, all of them in functional ways. And then all kinds of things happen. At the end of the episode, we have a single scene, which in writing we call the resolution, which in seventh grade literature class you probably called the denouement, the falling action. And we wrap up all these characters. And so it's a very complicated, rapid fire, sort of Rubik's Cube of a scene where we have to fit in, 2 to 3 line wrap ups for about 6 or 7 or 8 different characters. And becomes a question of what order do we do these things in and who comes out, all kinds of, it was very complicated. And we did it, and we did it in a way that I was very satisfied with. And the note we got was because in addition to the pilot for this show, we also have a series Bible. And in a series Bible, you talk about the show, you talk about the theme of the show, and at some point in the Bible, you talk about what's going to happen over the course of season one and then over the course of the next 5 seasons. And that is a lot. And I think for the most part, unless you are, David Simon writing The Wire and you go, okay, season one is the drug dealers, season two is the ports, season three is the schools, season four is the politicians, and season five is the media. And you know that going in. Unless you have that ability, all the stuff changes over the course of writing even the first episode and especially the first season. But we had a character at the end of season one, in the last few episodes of season one, that everybody really liked and became an important enemy of our main character. So the note was, we love that character so much, let's put that character in the pilot, in the Rubik's Cube resolution denouement scene. Just introduce that character so we know that character is there. To be continued. Tune in soon for part two. Now, let's talk about getting notes in the creative process. A note is feedback you get from somebody who did not write the thing that is supposed to make the thing better, that is supposed to punch it up in some way. It's somebody trying to be helpful, although it is not always delivered that way and not always received as someone trying to be helpful. A note can address story stuff, character stuff, tone stuff, just clarity in general. Does this make sense to me? Even because we are talking about show business, not show fun. It could even address marketability. Is this thing going to sell? Is it going to work? Are people going to buy tickets for it? It's a TV show. Why would they buy tickets? They have their own TV. Everything is on streaming now. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. And I think there's a lot of things you have to consider if somebody gives you a note. And the first thing to think about when you get a note is just, what is the note really saying? Try to identify what the sort of core issue is behind what this person is saying. And sometimes it's very apparent. Oh, and this happens to me sometimes where I'm like, it would be really funny if this character said this here. And then the note is, that is funny, but doesn't feel, it feels like it sells out the character. So is there something else they could say, or could someone else say that funny thing? And that means just having a real awareness of a very defined character who will or won't say certain things. This moment between these two characters doesn't feel true to their relationship. Are they treating each other the same way they always do? Unless it's a big moment where the relationship changes. But if it's not that, then it needs to be true to the relationship. Those are notes, I think, that are fairly easy to understand. Sometimes people are really unclear about the note they're giving, or the thing they say they want changed isn't really what they want changed. So it becomes this weird dance of trying to figure out what they're really saying. And I have been in rooms where people get very frustrated because the producers will give a note and it's unclear what the note actually is. And, you know, somebody might be like, well, who cares then? They don't know what they're talking about. So why should we know what they're talking about? And my feeling about that is, if the note is unclear, it just means there's something off there. And so your job as the writer is to look at it again and go, why would somebody reading this think that something is off? Let me figure out what the problem is, and I will fix it in a way that hopefully will satisfy that will satisfy the note. Now, let's talk about taking notes. And by taking notes, I mean receiving notes from other people, not writing down what other people are saying, like a writer's assistant. Not, people used to have to use shorthand in the writer's room before computers. They were stenographers. I met a guy once who had been a writer's assistant on Frasier, and the way he got that job was because he knew shorthand. And I'm guessing a lot of people listening to this don't even know what shorthand means. So look it up and maybe become a court stenographer. But anyway, taking notes, the first most important thing is a lot of times it feels like criticism. And in some ways it probably is, but don't allow yourself to be hurt or crushed or bugged by criticism. Don't, you know, sometimes there's an instinct to have an emotional response. And oftentimes that emotional response is combative and defensive. And that is not the right way to do this. Everybody has an ego. It is natural, I think, to feel defensive. You're a creative person, which means you're probably a sensitive person, either that or a psychopath. And I've known some of those as creative people as well. But the point is, you have to separate your work from yourself. You are not your work. So it's okay for somebody to criticize your work and not for you not to feel like they are attacking you. And I say that as someone who still feels attacked whenever I get notes. But notes are just a conversation about the material, about what you have written. So that's one thing to think about is like, let's just have a conversation about this and clarify what it is that's bothering you instead of feeling like I am being attacked and I need to lash out in some way. The second thing is, who is the note coming from? I will, when I write something, send it to a very select group of people who I have known for a long time and whose judgment I trust on these matters. So I am going to listen to what they say and consider it and go, okay, that makes sense to me, or that doesn't make sense to me, or I get where you're coming from. Not that doesn't make sense to me, but I get where you're coming from, but here's the reason I feel differently from that. And I think the thing to remember about that is any note that somebody has is okay because either it forces you to change what you have, or it forces you to think harder about why you have things the way you have them and whether or not that is right. So that's one person you can get notes from is trusted readers. TV is a very collaborative process, so there's lots of people involved right from the beginning. If you're working on a show that has a writer's room, there are people in the room. I mean, that's part of the collaborative process is one writer's going to say, I don't know, this thing isn't really working for me. And that, technically that isn't really giving notes, but it's the same thing where it's like, okay, let's figure out why this is a problem for this person. But once you have that part of the process finished, you are going to submit stuff to a producer or a network, or in a different situation where I am trying to break into the business, I'm submitting my stuff to a manager or to an agent who is going to have thoughts on what I have written. And again, it needs to make me think about what I have, and it needs to make me either change what I have or more firmly understand why I made things the way I did. And the next step beyond that, of course, is producers and networks are the people who are paying for stuff. So if they ultimately say, no, we don't want that, we want this, that's the note, then as a writer, you kind of have to listen to that. Or you could quit your job and do something else. That would be That would be acceptable as well. But generally speaking, at least, I mean, that does happen sometimes, but generally speaking, and at least in my experience, the networks and the production companies just want to make things better. And so generally they don't go, no, it's this, change it to this. So that's the next level. And then, of course, there is the level of showing it to your mom or your girlfriend, which I have right now. I have one of those things, and you know which one it has to be. And they're going to just go, this is the best thing I've ever, this is incredible. And you have to maybe ignore that as a note because they have a biased perspective. Here's some things to think about when you get these notes. Does it resonate with me? Does it make sense? Am I feeling like, oh, this person has a point there, or I get where they are coming from? Is there immediately a moment of, yes, you're right, that should be different from what it is? I should have caught that, but somehow I was too close to the work and I couldn't do it. And that, I think, is why you want notes. Another thing to think about right away is, can I implement this if it's something I feel like I need to implement? And how easy or hard will it be to change that? What else is it going to affect? Is it going to affect other character arcs? Is it going to affect theme? Is it going to affect structure? All of these things can be affected by notes, and that makes a difference about whether or not you want to implement this thing. And sometimes it's worth affecting all those things to make your project better. So, all things to consider. So ultimately, what I come to on these things is you. This is so obvious, but you don't have to take every note, but you have to consider every note. Figure out what the note means. Figure out what's behind it. Figure out what this person is trying to communicate. Figure out the validity of this person's opinion. Is this someone you need to listen to, both because of their position and also because you trust their judgment? And do you need to actually change the thing that they want you to change? So the last thing is handling the note taking. And that is what happened to me this week. And I've been taking notes for 25 years at this point. So you think I would know better. Like I was thinking about, this isn't really a writing thing, but it is a note taking thing. This was in an improv class 25 years ago or something that was being taught by the great Matt Besser, one of the greatest improvisers of all time, one of the most influential improvisers of all time. And he had us do an exercise where he wanted us each to communicate something specific to the rest of the class. And when it came to my turn, I didn't do it. I did not get the class to understand what I was trying to communicate. And Besser said, here's what you might have done differently. Here's what I thought about what you did do. And I said, well, here's why I did what I did and why I think people should have. And he just stopped me and he was like, are you disagreeing with me? And at the time, I got very offended. But in retrospect, I'm like, oh, he was just saying, like, it's a note. Just think about it and figure it out and don't feel like you have to waste our time by disagreeing with it. So when you're getting notes, don't argue. Ask for more clarification. Tell somebody you don't understand what they're saying. Get them to feed you more information. Can you tell me what didn't work for you? But in a note taking session, don't feel like you need to argue with that person. Take a step away, digest the note, see what it means to you, and whether or not you want to implement it. So that's what happened in this note taking session that I had this week, where this producer, who is great and who I love working with, said, hey, let's try to get this other character into that scene at the end so that it's there from the beginning. And in the meeting, I said, that's not going to work. We worked so hard on getting that on getting that scene to work in, like I said, in a Rubik's Cube kind of way, like solving the puzzle of how all these things could happen. So I was kind of definitively like, no, we can't do that. And the discussion continued, and it was clearly something that this producer felt strongly about and whatever. So ultimately, I ended up saying, okay, we'll take a look at it. And we did. We got together to work on the script and we looked at the scene and we thought about putting that character in, and it didn't work. And so now we have to go back and say, we tried it, but it didn't work. The problem is, and I don't think ultimately this is a problem in this case, but it could be in a different case, that by me saying that's never going to work and then coming back and saying, we tried it and it didn't work, it makes it feel like I went into it with the opinion that there's no way to make this possible. So it sort of undermines my statement that it didn't work because I was already saying it's not going to work, if that makes sense. So all I'm saying is when you're getting notes from somebody, just accept the notes and then go back for a second discussion and say, you fucking idiot. Why did you give us that note? It didn't work. So yeah, the thing about television is it's a collaborative process. You're always going to be getting thoughts and ideas and notes from other people, and navigating that and figuring out how to use that in a helpful way is ultimately going to make your work better, which is the point of all of it. You want to use the notes you get to make the work as strong as possible, which doesn't necessarily mean accepting and taking every one. You don't have to make everybody happy. If you can make anybody happy, you're doing better than me. But really, what you have to do is make yourself happy and feel like what is the best thing you're gonna be able to do. Until you get to that point where somebody else is paying you, then you have to make them happy too. All right, there is an entire episode about notes, taking notes, getting notes, giving notes, and a variety of other things. So I hope that was helpful. It was yet again a week of remembering stuff and learning stuff for me. So I appreciate you guys listening. There's lots of other stuff on my website. Subscribe to my newsletter from my website. My producer Dean just wrote a message to me that says I have a note. He was listening and he has a note. Do you really have a note, Dean?
Yeah, man, that was some real interesting stuff and good stuff about taking notes.
See, this is like giving something to my mom. You're like my mom, or if I had a girlfriend, what she would be like of like, that was great, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be in that club. That's a that club. But yeah, you're talking about notes and taking notes from other people. And I just wanted to know if you can talk to us a little bit about how you deal with notes from yourself. Do you do the same thing? Do you take all of your own notes? How do you
Mhm.
go about evaluating the notes that you set for yourself of how to make your project better or, leave those things alone?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. And I think that for me, a note, when I talk about a note, it's always going to be something that comes from somebody outside, somebody other than myself. Like, I do have criticisms of my own work and I do have ideas that are different from what's there. But to me, that's all just part of the process. And so I don't think about it as taking notes. And certainly, when I get notes or when I get thoughts of my own about the work or whatever, there's no part of me that's like, oh, how dare I think that about myself? I don't get defensive. I don't confuse myself with my work because I am my work and there's no way to not have those two things be integrated. So I am not ready to show things to other people until I have gotten all the way through something and changed whatever I feel needs changing and, you know, tested everything and made it as close to the word I always like to use in these things is bulletproof. Is my concept and my execution are my concept and my execution bulletproof? Can I show them to somebody and not get anything back from them that's going to affect it in any way? And of course, that's impossible. There's no way for that to happen because it's the thing I always talk about where it's like you have the thing in your head and you're trying to put it down on paper in a way that the exact same idea will exist in somebody else's head. And that's not the way thought and language work, but you try to get it as close as possible to what your idea is.
So this is the part where we feel like we done made it bulletproof and we're getting these notes back on what we feel is bulletproof.
Right. It's like you're already bulletproof. You're Superman putting on a bulletproof vest just in case, you know? What a great analogy that
Yeah, that
was.
was pretty fucking cold, man.
All right. Can we wrap there?
Yeah, man, that's it.
Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe, leave us a rating, and subscribe to my newsletter and go to my website and various other calls to action. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.